Hello, this is Story Isle. This video is about a forest area where people disappear in ways that should be impossible. In the vast wilderness of North America, there are pockets of forest where compasses fail, radios die, and footsteps fade into nothing. These places look ordinary, but those who enter describe an oppressive stillness, as if the land itself is holding its breath. This is the story of the missing 411 phenomenon in North America. Viewers' discretion is advised. Before we continue, if you want more stories the world can't explain, subscribe. Deep in the vast wilderness of North America, where forests stretch farther than the eye can see and mountains rise like jagged monuments to an older world, there are places that feel different. Places where the silence doesn't just fall, it presses. Where compasses twitch, animals avoid the valleys, and hikers report feeling watched even though they're completely alone. These are the lands whispered about in hushed tones, where the missing 411 phenomenon has taken root. A network of disappearances so sudden, so inexplicable, and so chilling, that even seasoned investigators refuse to walk into certain parts of the backcountry alone. This story begins with a ranger, a radio call, and a small clearing hidden deep inside Montana's Bitterroot Mountains. A place that would eventually be known only as the Echo Site. Ranger Elias Grant had worked in the park system for 23 years. He had tracked injured bears, responded to flash flood rescues, and carried out more than a dozen lost hikers. Nothing ever rattled him. That changed on a cool September morning when a trembling voice crackled over his radio. It was a father reporting that his 9-year-old daughter Lila had vanished right in front of him. Grant arrived at the trailhead within minutes. What he saw didn't make sense. Two sets of footprints, the father's and the girl's, walking together. And then hers simply ended. No drag marks, no signs of a fall, no disturbance. Just gone, as though she had stepped off the face of the earth. The father kept repeating the same thing, shaking violently as he tried to steady himself. He had been walking just a few feet ahead. He heard his daughter laugh behind him. He turned to respond, and the forest was empty. No footsteps, no screams, no rustling bushes. Silence. Within hours, search teams swarmed the area. K-9 units were brought in, helicopters circled the mountains, thermal imaging scanned the slopes. Nothing. It was as if the forest had swallowed the child whole. And this was just the beginning. Grant stayed long after his shift ended, pacing along the faint trail as daylight faded. He kept replaying the father's account, trying to imagine any scenario that made sense. A mountain lion attack? Impossible. He would have heard it. A fall. There was no terrain nearby steep enough to hide a child. Every explanation collapsed under scrutiny, leaving behind only an impossible void where a little girl should have been. This was not the first disappearance of its kind. But for Grant, it was the one that broke him. A week later, 2 counties away, another case surfaced. This time it was a woman named Mara Ellington, an ultramarathon runner with decades of backcountry experience. She vanished while running a route she had completed dozens of times. Her smartwatch GPS data showed something disturbing. At 13 hours 47 minutes and 23 seconds, her heart rate spiked suddenly. At 13 hours 47 minutes and 24 seconds, the GPS signal froze. And then, nothing. What happened in the next second has never been explained. When rescuers found her belongings 3 days later, they were stacked neatly on a boulder beside a stream. Her shoes placed heel to heel, her pack set upright, her jacket folded perfectly. But Mara herself was nowhere in sight. 3 months passed. Winter crept into the mountains. The Ellington and Miller cases, different states, different terrains, different victims, were quietly pushed into the same category. Unexplained wilderness disappearances. Off the record, among rangers, search and rescue teams, and those who had seen too many of these cases up close, there was another term for them. Missing 411. Grant couldn't shake the feeling that something linked the cases. Patterns repeated like echoes. Sudden weather shifts during the search, malfunctioning radios, dogs refusing to continue past certain ridgelines, reports of strange humming sounds just before victims vanished. Locals whispered about windows in the wilderness, thin places where the world didn't behave the way it should. But the case that pulled Grant fully into the heart of the mystery was the disappearance of an entire family in northern Idaho. It happened in late spring. A mother, father, and their teenage son were camping near a remote lake accessible only by a narrow dirt road. They were experienced outdoors people. They brought backup gear, radios, emergency beacons, and kept to a predictable check-in schedule. They were cautious, careful, prepared. And yet, on the morning of June 18th, their campsite was found abandoned. The tent was still zipped from the inside. Coffee water had been heated but never poured. 3 pairs of shoes were placed neatly by the lakeshore, as if each person had stepped out of them and walked straight into the water. But divers searched the lake. Side-scan sonar was used. Multiple dive teams swept the area again and again. No bodies, no clothing, no debris. Nothing but cold black water staring back at them. What troubled investigators most was the campsite itself. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away. Not even bare footprints from the waterline back to the camp. It was as if the family had simply vanished into thin air. But something at the site suggested they may not have left on their own. Grant visited the site himself and noticed something overlooked in earlier reports. The tree line around the lake was deathly silent. No birds, no insects, no wind. Even the air felt wrong, heavy, like the moment before a storm. And then he heard it. A faint sound carried from somewhere across the lake. A long, low hum that vibrated in the chest, not the ears. He turned in every direction, searching for the source. The sound stopped. The silence swallowed everything. That night, Grant returned home with a stack of case files he wasn't authorized to take. He spent hours cross-comparing them, chasing patterns no one else seemed willing to investigate. Precise times victims vanished. Weather anomalies within minutes of disappearances. Locations where compasses spun or GPS units lost signal. Clusters near boulder fields, berry patches, and bodies of water dogs refusing to track. The connections were undeniable. And one detail, shared across dozens of cases, would change how investigators viewed them entirely. One detail haunted him more than the rest. Many victims were found alive, days or weeks later, unable to explain what had happened. Their stories differed wildly, but one thread united them: lost time. They remembered walking, then waking somewhere impossible, on a cliff ledge miles away, deep in a cave they had no memory of entering, or on the far side of a ridge no human could climb. And almost all of them described the exact same sensation just before they vanished. A sudden distortion in the air, like heat rising off asphalt. A swelling silence. And then, nothing. Grant realized that the echo site cases weren't isolated at all. They were part of something larger, something ancient, woven into the land long before humans mapped its contours. Something that moved silently, unpredictably, leaving behind only questions. And the questions deepened when bodies began reappearing. The first was found at the base of a cliff, despite the fact that search teams had scoured that exact location days earlier. The second was discovered miles from where the victim disappeared, in terrain so difficult that even rescue personnel struggled to reach it. The third case chilled the entire search team. The victim was found lying in a perfectly open meadow that had been searched repeatedly. No footprints, no drag marks, no sign of how the body arrived, as if it had been placed there. But there was something else. In every one of those cases, the victims were missing their shoes. Grant wasn't the only one tracking these patterns. A researcher named Dr. Helena Kincaid, specializing in geospatial anomalies, reached out to him after noticing overlap in their investigations. She spoke with an intensity that matched his own. She had mapped over 1,200 disappearance sites across North America and discovered something extraordinary. Many of them lined up along fault zones, underground cave networks, and regions known for strange acoustic phenomena. She showed Grant her findings in a dimly lit office filled with topographical maps and red pushpins. When she connected the pins with string, the lines resembled a web stretching across the continent. Points of disappearance formed clusters around the oldest mountain ranges, the Appalachians, the Rockies, and the vast lonely forests of the Pacific Northwest. Some clusters overlapped perfectly with First Nations legends. Stories of thin places, where the land behaves differently, where people step into the forest and are never seen again, where time moves strangely. Grant felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. He didn't believe in myths, but he couldn't deny the evidence stacked in front of him. Their investigation drew them to an isolated region of the Olympic Peninsula, a stretch of rainforest so dense and uncharted that even the local tribes seldom entered. Reports going back 150 years documented vanishings here: hunters, hikers, children, even an entire logging crew in the late 1800s. The crew's tools were found neatly arranged beside the stumps they had been cutting. But every man was gone. Grant and Kincaid hiked into the peninsula together with two experienced trackers. As they moved deeper into the forest, the light dimmed, swallowed by the towering canopy. Moss-covered trees rose like ancient pillars. Mist curled between the trunks. Every sound felt amplified: their footsteps, their breathing, the drip of condensed water falling from leaves. But there was something else beneath it. A rhythmic vibration. Subtle, almost inaudible. As they approached a ravine, all four stopped. The forest had fallen completely silent. Kincaid raised her equipment, watching readings flicker erratically. Magnetic fields were fluctuating wildly. Radio static buzzed through their handhelds. One tracker muttered that he suddenly felt disoriented. And then they saw it. A shimmer in the air, like a sheet of glass reflecting heat, rippling gently between two massive cedar trunks. It wasn't an object, exactly, not solid, but the distortion was unmistakable. The air wavered like liquid, bending the image of the forest behind it. Several missing persons had described seeing something identical, just moments before they vanished. Grant approached slowly. He felt the temperature drop. The hairs on his arms rose. A faint hum pulsed through the ground. Kincaid whispered that this was the same anomaly recorded near several cluster points. A distortion that appeared briefly after disappearances, always described the same way by witnesses. A shimmer, a shift, a thinning of the air. Grant stepped closer. The distortion thickened. A deep, resonant vibration rolled through the earth like distant thunder. One of the trackers suddenly lunged forward, shouting that he had seen someone, a figure moving behind the shimmer. Grant spun, heart pounding, searching for movement, but the forest was still. Then the shimmering wall began to collapse inward, folding like water drawn into itself. The hum built to a piercing tone. Kincaid shouted at everyone to fall back. And suddenly, it snapped shut. The forest went black for half a second. Every radio went silent. Leaves rustled as if exhaling. The anomaly was gone. But so was the second tracker. Grant called his name again and again, his voice cracking through the trees. No response. They searched the ravine for hours. His footprints led right up to where the distortion had been, and vanished. The search that followed lasted 11 days. No scent trail, no clothing, no sign of struggle, not even a broken branch. It was as if the forest had reclaimed him in an instant. That night, Grant sat by the dying fire, watching the shadows flicker on the trees. He felt a weight settle over him, the crushing realization that they were no longer observers. They had stepped directly into the phenomenon itself. On the 12th morning, Kincaid woke Grant before dawn, her face ghost pale. She held out her tablet with shaking hands. A single image filled the screen. It was a still frame captured from her body cam footage the moment before the anomaly collapsed. The picture was blurry, the lighting dim. But in the distortion, behind the ripple of bent air, there was something unmistakable. A human silhouette, standing perfectly still, watching them. Grant stared at the image, his mouth suddenly dry. He couldn't tell if the figure was the missing tracker or something else. Taller, maybe. Its proportions slightly off. Its outline faintly luminescent. The trees were visible behind it, but bent, warped, as though seen through water. The figure stood in a space that didn't quite match the forest around it. Kincaid whispered that they had to leave now. Grant didn't argue. They hiked out of the peninsula without stopping, without speaking, driven by a primal instinct neither of them could fully explain. For weeks afterward, Grant couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that silhouette standing behind the shimmer, patient and still, as though waiting for someone, or something, to cross over. He resigned from the ranger service shortly after. He moved to a small cabin on the edge of Glacier National Park, where he lived quietly, avoiding the deep woods. But the silence followed him. So did the questions. One night, months later, he received a package with no return address. Inside was a rugged hard drive and a single sheet of paper with 2 words written in neat handwriting. It opened. The drive contained footage, time-stamped a week earlier, from an unknown backcountry location. The clip showed a group of hikers walking along a ridge. The camera shook suddenly. A shimmer spread across the air like a curtain being drawn. The same vibration, the same hum, and then one of the hikers vanished mid-step. No flash, no sound. One moment he was there, and the next he wasn't. The camera operator screamed. The footage cut to static, then black. Grant stared at the screen, the hum echoing in his memory. He realized something terrifying. The phenomenon was increasing, more frequent, bolder, and whoever sent the footage knew he would understand what it meant. Some places are not meant for us. Some boundaries are not meant to be crossed. These disappearances remain unsolved. The forests are still there. The patterns haven't stopped. And whatever is happening in these places has never been fully explained. Thank you for staying with this story. If you're ready to explore the next mystery, the next episode is waiting for you now. And if you'd like these journeys delivered the moment they're released, feel free to subscribe. Until then, stay curious and stay safe out there.